Hello Steelers, and welcome to this review of the Two Fat Lardies Through the Mud and the Blood. This is their rules for large skirmishers in the Great War. I'm also going to be looking as well in this review at Stout Hearts and Iron Troopers. Both of these can be bought from the Two Fat Lardies website. Relatively cheap. You can still get this in hard copy through the Mud and the Blood. This Iron Hearts and Stout Hearts and Iron Troopers is a PDF. I've got mine printed. I did this at Docs Direct. It cost me about £10 or so, I think. So dead cheap as well, on top of the price of the actual PDF. The PDF itself is about £7. This is retailing somewhere about 20, I can't remember exactly, about 20 odd pounds or something like that. But I wanted to do a review for this for quite a while, to be honest, and I was just playing a game of it at the weekend, and I thought, yes, I'll do a review because I think it certainly deserves it. It's probably one of the unsung heroes of the Two Fat Lardies stable. A lot of people, First World War is a period that a lot of people don't play, they don't game, and I think that is something that really needs to change, and this is a great game for that. Most First World War games really concentrate on the higher levels, so divisional stuff like you would have with what's it called, Spearhead, Great War Spearhead, and then battalion level with things like square bashing and stuff like that, whereas this actually gets right down to the nitty gritty of the men fighting on the ground. So it says large skirmishes, so it's really for about a platoon, or even more actually. You can take it further if you want to. There's a couple of scenarios in Stout Hearts which takes it beyond a couple of platoons fighting on the table, but you could quite easily play this game just with about 40 figures aside, and you don't need a huge amount of it. Rich also has a real interest and expertise in the First World War as well, and that really comes through in these rules. You can really tell, with most Two Fat Lardies games, there is a lot of historical research that goes into it, and it's no different in these. If nothing else, it's worthwhile getting just for reading about the national guidelines at the back, which tells you about the platoon structures of the four main armies. So that's the Germans, the French, the British, and the Americans. But beyond that, I mean, it's a good game anyway. I think there's a couple of things that I think could be improved with it, but it is an older Two Fat Lardies game. I think it was originally published 2009, so we're talking nearly 15 years old as I read this. This is a 2014 reprint. I got this back in 2014, and back then I wasn't playing I played no Two Fat Lardies games at all, and if I'm honest, we just did not get it at all. We could not understand it. So I would say that this is a kind of game that you either get somebody to show you how to play it, or you play it off the back of something like Chain of Command, or even more likely short practice. The reason for that is those ones, they feel a little, the modern versions of them at least, feel a little bit more developed than Through the Mud and the Blood, and for us going from things like square bashing into something like this, it just completely blew our mind. We were also playing rapid fire at the time as well, so it was completely different way of playing games to what we were used to. So that's more of a criticism of me and my understanding than a criticism of the rules, but I think it is something that could quite easily trip somebody up if they're not used to a Two Fat Lardies kind of thing. If you played stuff like Chain of Command, or if you played Sharp Practice, or even Iron Beat Shotgun, then you will probably be familiar with a lot of the stuff that's in this. If you hadn't, like we hadn't, then you wouldn't be, and I think it might be a little bit difficult, especially this. I'm talking about this particular set of rules. It's just about changing your mind and thinking about it. And again, as I said, that's not a criticism of these rules, because these rules are fantastic, they really are good. It's a criticism of me as a player more than anything else. So I've already mentioned that it basically it works on a card activation. What I'll do is I'll show you closer up the rules themselves, and we'll go through and we'll talk about them specifically. But I think it is actually also based on the original Sharp Practice 1, not the version that is floating around now. It's the older version. The reason I think that is because I've seen some of the old Sharp Practice. I've never played the old Sharp Practice, but I've seen some of the old Sharp Practice stuff, and there's quite a familiarity between the cards that are used in old Sharp Practice and in Through the Mud and the Blood. I could be completely wrong on that, but I think it's probably owes quite a lot to old Sharp Practice. Also, if you've played IMB Shotmum, you will recognise quite a few things in this, like blinds. They use a system of blinds in this, which is similar to IMB Shotmum or Charlie Don't Surf, those kind of things, those older stable of Lardy games. So again, there's elements of that. If you've played those, you can bring that with you to play this quite easily. And I think, like I say, if you know a bit about Lardy games, you'll soon pick this up. Just to say as well, there are no scenarios in this, and I'm going to talk about that. I think that that is probably one of its failings. But that said, they also do produce this, which is Stout, Hearts and Iron Troopers, which has, I think it's, let's have a look, there's actually 20 scenarios in this. So Through the Mud and the Blood is not really based on army lists, so it's not a case of like saying, right, okay, you know, I have X amount of points, and it's based on actual orders of battle, historical orders of battle. So it does talk about them, so it doesn't have army lists and it doesn't have particular scenarios, but it does talk quite a lot about the national makeup of platoons, so you can work off that to build your basic platoon. However, it's in Stout, Hearts and Iron Troopers that you actually get the orders of battle and the different army lists for each of these individual scenarios. So that's why I say it's much worth buying this on top of this as well, Through the Mud and Blood. This would also work very well for any other skirmish First World War game as well. You just have to change a few things around, but it's, you know, again, it's well worth it for 20 scenarios. £7 is peanuts basically. A huge amount of work has gone into that. Now, so I think that's probably one of its failings is probably just the fact that it doesn't have scenarios in it. But as I say, an extra £7 and you've got a ton of scenarios that are usable for other games as well as this, if this is not your cup of tea. Also, there's a large amount of actual historical background in that as well, so it's worthwhile just getting it just for that, if nothing else. And the same with the actual set of rules. So what we'll do is I'll walk you through the rules as they are. I'll change these over, and then we'll have a quick look at Stout Hearts as well. And I'll not go through every single scenario, but I'll just show you some of the basic ones, so you get an idea of the kind of thing you're playing. I thought I'd best do the two together as a review rather than the two individual videos. Alright, so I'll just set the camera up and we'll have a look in the book. Okay, so here we have Through the Mud and the Blood itself. As you can see, it says here, we've already said it, rules for live skirmishers in the Great War. Back cover just has the quick reference sheet, which is quite nice. You can just photocopy that and print that out yourself. It's your heart's desire. Opening her up, first of all, we got a couple of, I do apologise, my copy is absolutely knackered. I've had it for such a long time and used it quite a lot as well. But we've got some adverts, so these are quite old. These are probably out of date at this point, but doesn't matter. I've also realised as well that I actually stuck some of this errata stuff over the top of my original copy as well, so that's why you've got a slide between. I don't know what the original says anymore because I stuck it over the top there. But good introduction here. Interestingly as well, in the 2014 reprint, it also mentions that Paddy Griffith, whose assistance, encouragement and friendship I value greatly, has died, and I add his name to the list above, to whom this set of rules is dedicated. So that's quite nice just to see Paddy Griffith's name in there. Paddy did a lot of work on small unit tactics of the First World War and made people think a lot differently about how soldiers fought in that war, and his book British Battle Tactics of 1916 to 18 is a classic, and I urge anybody to buy that and have a look at it. It'll change your mind about the First World War. So we have a contents. What we don't have in this one is an index, unfortunately, but it's not a particularly huge amount of rules. 45, well, it says 45 pages. It's actually 60 pages in total. As you can see, 15 of those are the national guidelines. So that is basically 15 pages of history, which I'll show you. And these are the rules here. Just tells you about the different scales and things as well. So what do we have? So this is similar to, pretty much similar to chain of command from memory. 12 inches is 40 yards, which is perfect for 28mm figures, but it's closer to 15mm figures, which is what I use, with 15mm being equal to 6 inches. Don't know what that means. But there you go, that's your ground scale, because people always ask about that. And we generally uses mostly D6s, although it does talk about all of these. They do use them a little bit here and there, but it's mostly D6s and D10s in the game. And the explanation here is a thing that probably threw me first of all when I first started playing this, is the big men. And it's the big men that get things happening on the tabletop. We just couldn't get our heads around it when I first played it. As I say, now I think it's probably one of the better kinds of rule mechanisms for wargaming that I've ever come across. Just having the leaders doing the thing that leaders are supposed to do in battle. So again, the failing is on my part, not on the set of rules. Just an explanation of this here. And then I mentioned we have the card system, and the way it works is you deal out a card, and each card has a different unit leader on it, or a different type of card here. So we've got the blinds, command initiatives, support cards, sentries, outpost, time for a snifter, which is the end of the turn, a blank card which we can put in to use for any unexpected circumstances that you want to come up, and also these national characteristic cards as well. So we have storm cards, so we've got Up and Atom for the British, Sturmabteilung for the Germans, etc., etc. En avant for the French. Then we also have some rally cards, hesitant troops, heroic leaders, dynamic leaders, ammunition shortage, all these things. I'm not going to go through them all, but this is a great way, I think, of adding friction to the game. You draw a card out and something could happen, or you get to go, or your opponent gets to go, and you don't know what's going to happen next. It really breaks up the turn. It doesn't make it I go, you go, and it just really works really well. Again, this is something that if you've played Sharp Practice, you'll know this. It's pretty similar to this. There's a slight difference in Sharp Practice. When you get command cards with the flags on, you'll just use those anyway. It doesn't matter, they're just a basic level. In this, you have them at certain levels. So they're up to level 4, and it's only the big man who has a level above that can use those cards. So a big man of level 3, for example, can use an initiative of 1, 2 and 3. A big man of level 1 can only use a card of initiative of 1. So it's adding a little bit more friction to it, which I quite like. Not everybody can use the command initiatives. It's only the better trained officers or the better NCOs can use them. I really like that. Time for a snifter, again, is a good one just because it ends the turn. Normally, in most Too Fat Lardies games, or the ones these days, when a turn ends, nothing can do anything. In this though, units that haven't moved or activated or fired can do a few things. They can't do a great deal of things. Let me just show you. It does move along a little bit. It's mentioned here in this bit, and basically all they can do is either fire or move to a better position, which I don't mind. Normally I don't like it when everything can do something in a turn, but then, you're still restricted because all they can do is fire, or just, gather up around a shell crater or something like that. So it still works pretty well from my point of view, that, the fact that I do like it where not everybody is able to do something. Then we talk about the big men and their initiative, and we have 4 levels of big men. So we've got the able fellow, good sort, a damn fine chap, and then an absolute topper. And also then they have an initiative level, which is same as their status basically, and also an influence level, which they can influence units around them. And they use those initiatives to influence individual units. So a unit would be a section of, say, 8 men, for example. So an absolute topper would be able to basically operate up to 4 units around him if he wanted to, within 12 inches. So these are the men that are important to have them on the table. You also use the command initiatives as well to be able to increase their command initiative. So that's another thing as well. You can add to this initiative level in a turn. And they can do certain things as well, removing shock, that kind of stuff, charging into close combat, getting people to fire, getting people to move. And also in this as well, we actually have formations. If you actually have, if only, obviously it's all dependent on the command level of the big man. But they can actually command large formations, so you could have your entire platoon commanded by just one man, basically, if they're doing the thing. But it says, this arrangement will come to an end as soon as the formation is fired on, after which the individual groups will function separately for the rest of the game. So it's like when they're not under fire, they're able to operate a lot easier and do things a lot quicker. So you can get four sections moving across the table very quickly, but then as soon as they start to get fired at, that's when it breaks up. And again, really nice way of doing things. You're not just sitting at the back of the table, one unit moving forward one at a time. So we also have, he talks about the chain of command as well, and just basically it's different units, different officers. Officers can only give you orders out to their units and things, so support weapons and stuff like that might not be able to be influenced by a particular big man of like a tank, for example, can't be influenced by an infantry big man, for example. And then it just describes what you can actually do in a group's turn. I think now this is the thing that I think that probably this is one of my criticisms of it, is that when I first read it, I was very confused, because we had what it calls is in the group's turn, each group has 2 action dice to do what they want with. Now, if these were just called actions, it would have been a lot easier for me. And it's, again, a criticism of me rather than anything else, but it's just I think it's just a bit strange term, because these action dice are used for all sorts. I guess you're using 1 dice to move and 1 dice to fire, or half a dice to fire if you're firing with rifles. So that's probably why they've used it here. But it's basically each group has 2 actions which they can do once they have been activated by a big man. So the big man will use his initiative, and then the group will use 2 actions. So again, very similar to sharp practice, in that same way that the leader activates, he uses his command initiative, and then the actual unit uses 2 actions to do something. And as I say, I think this threw me back in 2014. I was thinking, why, what are the dice all about? Do I actually have physical dice? And it isn't, it's just actions. But as I say, that's my stupidity more than anything else. We can also use runners as well to get people across. Then we have, there is morale comes into it, but this is only really for how far you retreat when you take shock, and we'll talk about shock later on. So this is you just have different types of morale, really, and the lower morale you have, the further back you will fall back if you get more shock. So that's how that works. Then there is the next part is talking about the different specialist roles within the First World War, and a lot of this comes really down to the development of tactics, especially from 1916 onwards, where all armies were starting to use the new weapons that were being put into the field. So we got riflemen, bombers, trench cleaners, which is grenadiers, rifle grenadiers. Also got snipers, and as we get over here, we got pioneers. Also, you can put men out as sentries and outposts and scouts. And again, when it says groups, it's not specific. A group could be a section, or it could just be a couple of men that have been broken off. So there's a lot of leeway in how you form your units in this game, and this covers some of these things as well. Movement, like all two-file Lardy games, it's done on dice. If you're moving on blinds, you get an extra dice to move, well, you actually get 3 dice to either spot or move. If you're not on blinds, you can deploy from a blind. You can actually then you'll move on 1 or 2 dice, depending on how many of your action dice you want to use. And you've got different tabletop movements as well there, just depending on where you're what you're going, what kind of terrain you're moving through. So this is the effects of that as well. Not say too much about that. I really like variable movement. I think it's a lot better than fixed movement rates. It just works better as far as I'm concerned. So I really like it in this, because you don't always know if you're going to reach the safety of that wall or not. Then there is also spotting rules as well, which work particularly well actually. So everybody's deployed on blinds when they start, so you don't know what your enemy facing. You could add dummies into that as well, which is quite nice. And you basically just roll 2d6 and have to score over a number to see if you see them. But you have to use up action dice to do so. So it's making you think about what you're going to be doing, you know, and you can add extra dice into that and things. So it's quite nice for that as well. So you can move units around flanks and things without the enemy, your opponents, actually knowing what they are as they're coming through. So I really like that. And again, we're talking about the infantry specialists. We've already mentioned those previously, but then it's just more explanation as to what these are. And there are lots of these little Commando comic style examples of things, just explaining to you how the actual game works. It's an older Too Fat Lardies rules, so I think if this was written now, there would be nicer examples in this, which might make made a difference for me at least. Like in Chain of Command or even in Sharp Practice, there are some really nice illustrations as to how things work, and I think that's possibly just something that I was missing out on myself. But again, you know, it's a development of an old. A development of a style within the Too Fat Lardies house design style. So these are, as I say, these are older rules, but all the concepts that are in these, you would get them in any modern Too Fat Lardies rules anyway. So you'd be able to take it from Chain of Command and just come straight back into this. Just to continue there, talking about here's more talk about the weapons and things, and also machine gun stoppages. This is a nice little addition. If you throw more 1s and 6s, your light machine guns and heavy machine guns will stop, and you have to most of them will fire 4 shots per dice that you use, so that's up to 8 in a turn. And then what you do is you basically roll the dice to get a 5 or a 6, and then you can, however many of those dice you've rolled, what's left over is how many shots you get. So if, say, you've got 8 shots from your LMG and you roll 3 dice to clear a stoppage, and you get on the 3rd dice, it means you've got 5 dice to fire with the rest of it. It's quite a nice little way of doing it. And because weapons were in there, these kind of automatic weapons were in their infancy at the time, there were a lot more there was a lot more stoppages happening at the time. And then we also just have extra heavy weapons, flamethrowers, mortars, and off-table support weapons as well. So there's other bits and pieces. Firing, dead simple, very easy. You roll for rifles, you roll 1d. Well, you have half a d6 for every action firing. So a man using 2 actions in a turn would fire 1d6 basically. You need to hit 3 to 6 on close, 4 to 6 effective, 5 to 6 on long. Slightly different to Chain of Command, where that is 4 to 6, 5 to 6, and then 6 for long range. So they're ever so slightly different. And also slightly different is the effect of hits as well. So if you're in the open, in Chain of Command, it's a 1 or a 2 is a miss, 3 or 4 is shock, 5, 6 is kill. Whereas in this, it's a 2, 3, 4 is shock, then 5, 6 is kill. And then it jumps up. If you're in light cover, 4, 5 is shock, and then a 6 is a kill. So that's more like Chain of Command. You could quite easily just take the firing rules from Chain of Command and change these around if this doesn't feel right to you. I don't see any difference between the two, to be perfectly honest. I think it still works. I haven't had any, it doesn't feel like they're getting more shock or less shock than they are in Chain of Command. I don't really feel differently. Also, we have hits on big men is slightly different. In Chain of Command, you roll a d6, in this you roll a d10 to see, depending on how many men have been killed in the. And you roll a d10 under that number of men being killed, and then that might hit your officer or your big man. So you'll notice so far there is no force morale, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit. But yes, we also have off-table support as well, so we've got artillery and barrages and things. And again, relatively similar to Chain of Command, these affect large areas. This is not... So a simple barrage exactly will be 6 inches deep and as wide as a table. So this is, it's actually moving across the table. This is not like a single individual shot that comes down in other rules. I shall not say their names, but it's actually how artillery was used, or as close to how artillery was used in a game that you can get. We've also got machine gun barrages as well, which was a big part of the First World War. Machine guns were largely used for barraging enemy positions as much as they were for defensive fire. They basically just fired them up at an angle and dropped them on in enemy areas whilst they were attacking. There is obviously also gas as well in here. Now, gas is one of those things that is used in wargaming relatively wrong, and this is slightly different. Gas was not a killing weapon. It was more of a weapon to stop troops doing what they were supposed to be doing, basically to make them tired and to make them fight at a lesser effect. And this is basically what it does in here. You get shock. Rather than anything else, you generally don't kill. Kill results do not apply, but are treated as additional shock. So that's great. That's probably the closest I've seen for gas being used in a war game than when it was actually used. Right, bottle is basically our morale, or shock, as it is known nowadays in Too Fat Lardies games, and in this you lose your bottle. So basically what happens in this is there's a difference here with this and with Chain of Command, and this I think is probably the biggest thing that is the difference, is that in Chain of Command not only do you lose shock, when you gain shock, you basically... in Chain of Command you will break if you've got double shock, and same in sharp practice as well nowadays. You will retreat, or you will run away 2d6 plus 6 inches. In this you don't. It's different. What happens is when you get the number of points of shock exceeding the number of men, then all you do is you start to retire. So this is more like, I think, like the older sharp practice. So, and there is also no force morale as well in this, like there is in Chain of Command and in sharp practice. So it can turn into a little bit of a fight to the death, and I've seen that certainly in the games I played sometimes, where it's almost wiped out to a man. The units will retreat when their shock falls down, but this is where your morale comes in. So if you're good, you only retreat 1 inch per excess point of shock, 2 inch per reasonable if you're reasonable, and then poor 3 inch per excess. So you do retreat, and they might fall off the table, but they disappeared off. So what I would suggest is taking the force morale rules from Chain of Command and just supplanting them straight into this. Use that. So units pin and then they break. Then you do a force morale test. If a big man is hit, do a force morale test. You could, although you've got teams and sections in Chain of Command, you could quite easily change that to anything smaller than like 5 men is a team. Anything bigger than that is a section. So you could quite easily do that, and I think it just would improve the game vastly. It's not really a criticism of this, it's just because this was written before they developed those force morale ideas. So sometimes it can just feel like it's a bit of a grind just to finish the game off when you've got the last couple of units left on. It's one of those things, there might be a point where with a force morale you would have already lost the game anyway. So I think that's probably that's a criticism of the game, but it's an understandable criticism simply because those rules haven't yet been developed, and it is so easy just to get the bad things happen table from Chain of Command and just go, right, there you go, we're using this. So again, not really a criticism, I would say. Close combat. Similar to, again, a lot of the Too Fat Lardies stuff, you get a d6 for each man, you add dice to your pool, roll them together, 5s and 6s, or kills and shock. Simple as that. Nice and easy, and it's a really bloody affair as well, and it is a good way of finishing off an enemy. And there's also a little bit about night fighting as well. So this is for things for trench raids and stuff, small trench raids in the night and that kind of thing as well. Then we've got a really nice pictures of some tanks and some Germans in the centre there. Then we also have other bits and pieces. I'm not going to go through everything here, but just I'll talk about the main rules, but I want to show you some other bits and pieces here. So we've just got the wiring engineering. We've also got armoured vehicles as well. So we've got all the tanks, huge amount of tank types that were used in the First World War, and how they work, and how they work in the game as well. Very simple, really. They're generally commanded by a big man, and quite nice and simple. We've also got aircraft as well if they come in and do attacks, so we've got that as well on top of it. And then we have a section 1, supplementary section 1, which is all about Great War artillery. And as I say, this is probably one of the good reasons to buy these rules, if nothing else, because this is the kind of thing that you don't see in a lot of wargaming rules, especially about the First World War. So we've got 2 pages basically of how artillery developed in the First World War. And the First World War, no matter what people think about machine guns, it's an artillery war. It is all about artillery. It always was and it always will be. Even the Second World War, it's largely artillery over everything else, because that's the stuff that's clearing the way. I don't know how true it is, but they do say that 70% of all casualties in the First World War were caused by artillery, 30% was everything else. So it's quite an important part of a First World War game, and it should be as well, even at this level. And this is probably some of the most detailed artillery stuff that I've ever seen in a game. So just to show you these pages here, you actually got these different types of barrages, which you draw up as a fire plan as part of the start of the game. So I said it's generally played with about a platoon, but you can easily make that up to a full company and more. And if you're doing so, then you would want to be using artillery fire plans and things in these. And this is just really good, just for showing you how artillery actually worked in the First World War. As I say, Rich did a lot of research into this, and it's an incredibly important thing to consider, which a lot of rules don't. So that's a great thing for it. Here we go, support generators as well for those artillery, just to show you when you want to use artillery, you roll for it to see how much you get, and then you construct your fire plan, and also defences as well as part of that. Over here we have supplementary section 2, which is the national guidelines, and this is about 15 pages of history of platoons in the First World War, and this is again great. This is a really nice addition to these rules. Never mind whether you like the rules or not, it's worthwhile just getting just for this bit, really. So this is a really good introduction into how the four main armies, so that's the Germans, the British, the French and the Americans, how they fought at this Western Front, of course, how they fought and how they developed their tactics and their technology. So you got a couple of pages there on the Germans, including how they use tactics, infiltration tactics through the cutting through front lines and things. Pages and pages of this. And also just troop qualities and different bits and pieces as well that you want when you're putting together your forces, your limitations on these as well that you would have. Also, there we go, the French, and again we have the tactics and technology and how they changed and how their companies and their platoons are made up. And as I said, this would be worthwhile getting just for if you want to play other war games that are First World War based, just to give you an idea of how these things are made up, how each platoon is made up, because a lot of war games don't include this stuff in them. Then we got the British as well, and Of course, SS143, my favourite training pamphlet, is mentioned in here. This is where he talks about it and how it develops. And the blobs and the worms is all stuff that Paddy Griffith wrote about in his book on the British tactics of the First World War, which again is worthwhile having a look at as well, just as a supplementary as part of these rules. And America is the final part of that, and again it's a smaller section on America because they pretty much copied everybody else basically, but they certainly did. So as I say, there's 15 pages of good history just in this, just to show you really how the different sides fought in the game itself. So that's the actual main rule book. So what I'll do now, without making this too longer of a review, but I will have a look at this as well. This is Stout Hearts and Iron Troopers, and this is the supplementary part. This is the scenarios for Through the Mud and Blood. I'm guessing these were probably not included in the original book, probably due to cost, I would have thought, because this in itself is, let's just have a quick look, this is actually 86 pages long. So as I say, £7 for an 86 page long document. I got this printed, I think it was about £10-ish for getting this printed, so in total it's cost me 17 quid, you know, for something that I'm going to use a lot of. Let's just have a little quick look in here. So we got the list of contents, up to 20 scenarios. We've also got some really nice basic training stuff as well in here, which I want to talk about. So we've got training the entente, we've got attack on strong point, platooning the attack between the lines, platoon clearing a village, and an infantry attack with tank support. Then we've also got training an Imperial German army, attacks on strong points, and attack on entrenched positions. And then we actually have a set of historical scenarios that are all actually based on historical actions. And having played a couple of these, they are very good and they're very well thought out. So again, there's a development section of the infantry tactics, which I'm really interested in. I love the development of infantry tactics in the First World War, so it's great to see this. And again, just to keep saying this, you don't see this in other war games, in other First World War war games that I've looked at. Loads of stuff on this, just explaining how units did attack and how things happened and how things developed. Tons and tons just on that. So there you go, almost 10 pages just about development of tactics. Then we get onto some of the basic stuff. This again just develops on those themes of how platoons attacked and how the individual sections were broken down into the different types. So you have rifle bombers, Lewis sections, riflemen, and also bombers as well as part of the SS143 training pamphlet. And then these scenarios, this one is a very basic one. You've got the Germans in a trench here, British are attacking across here. It basically tells you how many men you have. So you've got, let's show, so section 1 is the bombers. So we've got Frank Romney, status 1 with 8 men, 2 bayonet men to protect the bayonet men, to protect the bombers, and also 6 bombers. Then we've got the riflemen, Bill Hythe, status 1 with 8 riflemen, etc, etc. We've also got the headquarters as well. And then we have on the other side, we've got the Germans. They are made up of rifles, 2 rifle sections and a machine gun section. And then as each one of these tells you exactly how many cards you should put in of the particular types. And as I mentioned before, command initiatives. So it tells you how many of each of those you have in there as well. And any special cards, so stuff like Up and Atom. And then we also have as well tactical solution here, which shows you basically exactly how you really should play this out on the tabletop, and it works because I've tried it. So basically, you put your LMG on the. This is literally from the SS143 training pamphlet. LMG goes onto the flank to fire. Meanwhile, the rifle bombers rain bombs down on them, and the bombers and the bayonet men move in to the flanks to clear out the position, and it works. Then we've got the other one. These are some of the simple ones with more tactical solutions here, just showing you how they're supposed to attack. Clearing a village. Let's get through, and again, just showing you once again how villages were actually cleared in the First World War, and these tactics work. And infantry with tank support is here, and the tactical solution here as well, showing you again how tanks were, their tactics were developed, especially during the Battle of Cambrai. That's really where they started to come to the forefront in 1917. German stuff as well. So you can take over the Germans, and again they also have their, because they had a different method of attacking, because they had different weapons within their platoons. So again, just showing you how to do those. And another German one there, attacking an entrenched position. Again, showing you once again how that platoon does it. So then we get into, these are the historical scenarios. These are written by I think Maxwell, I think it is, Rich, and also by Sid Roundwood as well. All well researched and all particularly nicely illustrated as well, with good maps. Just to show you it with all the information that you need in each of the individual scenarios, because it's very much based on scenarios. Each scenario has its own rules, its own way of playing and things. And again, once again, you know, each one of these has the cards in them. So I'm not going to go through every single one. I just want to show you one that I've recently played, which was Holding Back the Tide here. This was where Robert Guy won his VC in 1917, November of 1917, with the Germans attacking down this village here, and they were holding the bridges over here, him and a bunch of clerks. And this one is a really nice, actually really nice introductory scenario, because you don't need, I think you need about 30 or 40 figures in total on both sides, so you could probably put this together quite easily. You probably don't need that many buildings. You could quite easily replace the buildings with other bits and pieces if you don't have them. But just a nice, not your typical First World War. That's the good thing about this. A lot of these are not or what I should say typical. I should say more like a trope for wargamers, is to have shell craters and mud everywhere. These aren't. You know, most of these scenarios are not. Most of them are fought over nice open ground, including villages and things, as they were fought over, rather than, you know, smashed up areas of mud that people sunk into. So there is a lot to go at from this, and as I say, 20 scenarios, which if you don't want to play Through the Mud and the Blood, this is just worthwhile getting just for the history, to be honest. And it's also worthwhile just getting for if you want to play other First World War games with this. You could just quite easily take the rules out of these and just, you know, play your favourite set of rules with them. So I would certainly recommend getting this, and I'd certainly recommend getting this if you're getting it, if you're buying Through the Mud and the Blood anyway. So there we go. That's as much as I can tell you about that. Really, that's the end of it there. Again, some of the older adverts for various sets of rules. But that is Through the Mud and the Blood, the First World War platoon level game by the Two Fat Lardies, along with Stout Hearts and Iron Troopers, the scenario book for the same. Now, I would thoroughly recommend both of these. And I mean, I'm a Two Fat Lardies fan anyway, but these just play fantastic games. They really do. And this is such a good supplement. Just the amount of the history that's actually packed into these rules is really, really good. There's a lot of thought that's got into it, and it has, you know, they produce very good games. Okay, so I will leave it at that and say thank you very much for watching this review. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, let me know in the comments below. Let me know if you've played Mud and Blood in the past, and if you've enjoyed it. And if you haven't, about half of you are not subscribed to the channel, so if you would like to subscribe to it, that would be very nice. And if you want to help out the channel, you can do so through Patreon, and also through the channel membership, where you get early access and ad-free access to videos, and also you can also buy me a one-off coffee as well, which all helps. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next Storm of Steel video.